Hello, everybody, and welcome to what is becoming now a weekly edition of The View from the Top, a special edition with myself, Brian Friedman from Benivo, and Julia Onslow-Cole from Fragomen. So thank you for listening in, everybody out there in LinkedIn world. And as ever, the subject that we're going to be covering today is the whole question of the challenge that we are facing and our assignees are facing due to coronavirus. And the awful situation that I think that we're all in. If you are out there in LinkedIn listening to us, please, as ever, can I ask you to join in the conversation, write in the comments box. We want to know who's there. Just let us know you're there, where you are in the world. But also let us know what's on your agenda. We've got some great experts on the show today. I'll tell you who our guests are in just a moment, but we've got some great guests, and we're just really looking forward to your comment and to sharing and engaging with you. If you do enjoy the show, please hit the like button, the love button, the applause button, the heart button, anything but the frown button, as often as possible, and also do share this. We really want to get the community coming together to learn and share and to help each other in a way that's just so important. We do have some great guests on the show today, more than in a moment, and also we will be talking about the Pro-Bono COVID-19 support tool that Benivo has launched, and which many of you out there amongst the service providers have agreed to support and help, and I know many of you corporates are looking to adopt. So our guest today, let me tell you who we've got coming up. First of all, Julia is going to be doing her usual roundup of everything that's happening in immigration and travel restrictions around the world, and Julia is going to be kicking off. After that, I'm going to be joined by Nitzan Yudan from Benivo, and he's going to be talking about the Pro-Bono COVID-19 support tool that we've developed, and indeed will show you a very quick, one or two screen shares of that. I say very quick because we did cover it in detail yesterday, and that is up on LinkedIn too. We're also going to be joined by Yuki Watanabe of the Gap, and also by Patricia Tavares from Unilever. So Yuki is based in San Francisco. I know it's frighteningly early in the morning for you, so many thanks, Yuki, for being with us. And also, Patricia, you're in Brazil, and we are going to be talking a bit about Latin America today, so we'll be really interested in your comment. Anyway, without further ado, what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Julia Onslow-Cole, and she's going to talk to us about some of the global trends that we're seeing in the industry. So, Julia, maybe I could ask you to kick off with our normal sort of roundup of everything that's going on. And as I said, everybody out there in LinkedIn world, please do feed through your comments. Let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like, what we can do to help you. And in particular, give us your comments and questions about anything global mobility at the moment. We've got this amazing panel of experts on the show today. Julia, give us your world tour.
Thanks, Brian. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to go and give you a sort of global update from last week and the week before, and then I'm going to focus particularly on Southern Africa and Latin America, because really these are areas that we haven't really covered in a great detail in the last two shows, and these were areas that we've had a lot of questions on. So a quick global update starting with Asia Pacific. We've seen, and you'll have seen pictures on the news today, that as anticipated and as we've explained in the last two broadcasts, Wuhan has lifted a lot of its travel restrictions today from the 8th of April, but there's still the China travel ban. And a breaking news development that I wanted to highlight to everybody is that I spoke this morning to Mark Buchanan, who's our head of Asia Pacific, and also Becky, who's our partner in China. And it used to be sufficient if you had a work permit for China, that would act as a re-entry visa. But from the 28th of March, the authorities in China are requiring an additional business visa to come back to China as well. So it's an additional step, a new process, and you will need to apply. But the Chinese consular posts are not processing any applications. And we have a lot of assignees, particularly in Singapore, waiting to get back into China, and they will all need this new extra process. So this is something to be really aware of, and it's something that's happened since we spoke last week. In the UAE, we're similar to where we were last week. Still the travel ban, only Emirati or immediate families are allowed in. You'll remember that I said that they had formalized the process for exceptional cases. All over the weekend, we've been working on some of those exceptional cases, and we think there's about, well, over 30,000 cases, exceptional cases in the queue. They've partially opened outbound flights, but officially they're only bringing back cargo. There's also some concessions right across the UAE for resident visa holders, 1 to 3 month extensions. But you have to really remember that it does vary from free zone to free zone, from state to state. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're looking exactly in the area for those particular requirements. A quick word about Morocco and Egypt. The government offices are completely closed. Moving on to the US, I just want to say a couple of points from last week about the US, and speaking to my colleague Tina Pelequin, partner in the US, she was saying to me last night that it really is important for global mobility leaders to remember that just because there's a standstill, and obviously we can't do any cross-border transfers, you can be getting on with green card applications. And so the green card processing is continuing, and that is something that is a good thing to be doing at this particular time, and many companies are using that as a recruiting tool. We've seen a lot of guidance come out from the US CIS department over the last week, particularly alleviating in-person filings. And another top tip that I want to give you is that, as I explained last week, you can now file your H-1B petitions, and you have your 90 days to file them. But Tina was pointing out that it's really important to triage them. So you put in the ones first that you need the first, and you really need for people to start on the 1st of October, because there's no premium processing. And as I explained last week, things are going to take a long time. Now, a little bit of breaking news from Europe. I spoke to Christine Sullivan this morning, who's one of our partners in Europe, and she said that the European Commission was actually planning today to issue an exit strategy. It was supposed to be an exit strategy as to what was happening across Europe for all the countries and how they were going to end their lockdown. And then they pulled it back because apparently there was quite a lot of disgruntlement between countries saying, well, this is really a country thing, and this really shouldn't be, a EU-wide initiative. And I think it's quite interesting because it's very different from the position that the EU were on Brexit, where they're very much acting as one collegiate bunch. And I think it points towards the direction that we will see hardened borders, internal borders in Europe, and more countries doing their own thing. So I think that's an interesting development. And taking back to the points I made in the last two broadcasts, it's really important to look at things on a country-by-country basis. The other thing to say is that certainly Austria, certainly Ireland are looking at an exit strategy from the lockdown. And so now is the time to think of your remobilization plans. And there are a lot of different remobilization plans that you can put in place in Europe, taking advantage of Van der Elst visas, taking advantage of the intra-company transferee directive. So now's the time to think about it. And the last point on Europe is that since last week, there's been several countries making announcements about posted worker notification and social security concessions, realizing that people are having to work from their home, and these concessions are providing some relief. So it's very important to look at that. But a last point in Europe on compliance is, do not forget the new rules coming in on the 1st of July, which you need to prepare for, which will impact your posted worker notifications, because they will impact the salary thresholds. And I think most people are aware of those changes, but they will go ahead on the 1st of July. And then finally, just to say something about the UK, since last week, the Home Office has issued more guidance. They've refined the furlong rules, but there's still no complete clarification from them as to whether Tier 2 migrants fall under the minimum salary requirements if they're part of the furlong arrangements. There's been some really good new rules for doctors and nurses, giving them a free 1-year in-country extension for those whose visas expire on the before the 1st of October. And there's also been some more policy around the extension applications, and they've formalised the process in which you can get these extensions for in-country expiries. And the last thing I want to say is that you will remember on our first show, Fragomen took as a pro bono case for Remedium some doctors who were stranded outside the UK and wanted to come in, and we've been negotiating with the Home Office, and they've shown immense flexibility. My colleague Siobhan Owens has been dealing with this, and we are very hopeful that we will be able to bring them in. So we need to sort of watch this space. So just moving on now to Southern Africa. So in our last 2 weeks, we haven't really done a deep dive on Southern Africa. It's been about 7 weeks since Africa recorded its first COVID-19 cases, and the numbers are exponentially increasing across the Africa region. I think only 3 of the region's 54 countries are virus-free. There's been about 10,000 cases and almost 500 deaths across Africa. And I think that it's important to cover South Africa because it has the highest number of cases, and it's certainly where we have the biggest number of assignees. There's an awful large number of international assignees who are in South Africa at the moment, or who want to go into South Africa from all around the world. There is now a complete lockdown in South Africa, and you're only allowed to go out for essential services such as groceries or medical assistance. And the Department for Home Affairs is not processing any matters except death or birth certificates or identity documents. And there's absolutely no processing of immigration applications. The government in South Africa has given a concession for those whose visas have expired or will expire. Normally, what happens in South Africa is if your visa expires and you're technically overstayed, you're declared as an undesirable person, and you have to go through this process, which is called a good cause application. And you have to show why you can exceptionally or should be allowed to make a visa application. And this alone normally takes 3 months. Now, the government has said this is waived. You do not have to do this if you've overstayed. I spoke to Lunga Mani, who's our partner in charge in South Africa, and he said a real top tip for all global mobility leaders is that when you start filing applications in South Africa, even though there is this concession, it's really important that now you document very carefully the reasons that people couldn't apply. So, for example, some citizens say couldn't go back to India, but you document it all, because he said that although the authorities have given this concession, you can't just rely on it completely. It's really important you show good cause within the actual application. The second thing to say, which is so important, is that in South Africa, they've decided to revoke all visas if you're deemed to come from a high-risk country. And that includes UK, Italy, Spain, US, France, Iran, and I think China's still on the list. And so that means that if you've not entered, your visa will be revoked, and it will take a long time to get a new visa, because it's not just filing a new application, it's the supporting documents. And in South Africa, you have to show a police clearance certificate for any country that you lived in for more than a year since you were 18. And some of these, most certificates only last 6 months, and some countries take weeks to get them from. So you can imagine that there's going to be an enormous delay getting people into South Africa. So all global mobility leaders should warn their business about this now. And another point, which is really important and that we have not been able to clarify, but my partner Lungamani is looking at and talking to the government, is what happens to people who left South Africa with visas. Are those visas going to be expired? Because he and I were looking together at the wording from the president about this, and it actually looks as if their visas will expire, but this is something we can perhaps touch on next week. Just saying a few words about Nigeria. There's a lockdown in Lagos, Ogun and FCT. No one can cross the internal borders. There are no immigration services in Nigeria, but Nigeria has said there will be no enforcement measures against people caught up in COVID-19. And they say that they will announce concessions, and we're hoping they might come out tomorrow. Nigeria have also revoked visa on arrival, and they've revoked visas if you're applying from a high risk country, similar to South Africa, and they list them out. In Mozambique, they've suspended but not revoked, so that's a really important difference, and they too have a list of countries. In Ghana, they're continuing to process cases, but only those that were submitted before the lockdown in Accra and Kumasi. And in the DRC, this is the only country in Africa where they've given automatic extensions. Also, I spoke to George Muse, who's a Fragomen partner based in Kenya this morning, and he reported that Uganda has a total lockdown, and there have been formal communications from the government in Uganda that they wouldn't penalise people who've been impacted because of COVID-19. When I spoke to him this morning, he said there was, he thought that the Kenya government would take a different slant than a slant on things than South Africa, but we were waiting for an announcement, and literally just before this started, the breaking news was that Kenya did make an announcement, and it is very good. It's saying that basically they're going to start a process from the 13th of April, an automated process for the issue of extension visitor visas and other visas, and a process for a drop box where you can make work permit applications. So it was exactly like George Massey was saying. So finally, moving on to Latin America.
Actually, before we do move on to Latin America, if I could just say we're having loads of comments from people thanking us for taking part all over the world. And one very specific question for you on Africa, if I may, Julia. And this is from Nada Al-Harazi. And she says, thanks, Julia. What about South Africans moving to work in countries requiring police certificates, etc., for work permit applications? Are these police certificates being issued?
No, they're not. No, they're not. And as we know, that those certificates from South Africa would normally take, a good few weeks to be granted, but they're not. And that's a really good question, and thank you so much for it. Because I think this, as we carry on over the next few weeks and everything remobilizes, this is one of the things that's going to be difficult. It's not going to be so much the country itself that you're going to, it's going to be getting these documents from other countries.
Okay, so let's move on to Latin America, shall we?
Yes, so Latin America, and I wanted to say thank you to Fedi Leonor Echeverrio and Laura Weingott, because they really were very helpful in giving me some information for today. And also just to say that all of the information is on the Fragomen website, which is also on Benivo's website. Because if you look across Latin America, you'll see that there's various different stages in different countries. In the major economies in Latin America, there's either total partial entry bans, total partial lockdowns. In some countries, immigration departments have shut completely, or they can file limited applications. And in some countries, there's concessions, but they're expiring. So on our website, which is free for everybody, we've listed the countries, we've listed the dates of the expiry of the concessions. And if there's more detailed questions, you know, you're so welcome to contact me on LinkedIn and I will get you specific answers. But there is a great concern in Latin America about people traveling cross-border. There was a person that actually breached quarantine in Uruguay, caught a boat with lots and lots of people on it to Buenos Aires. And everybody on that boat, or a lot of people on that boat, are now affected, and that it's in quarantine. So a lot of the things are actually, you know, designed to stop that sort of situation. Also, it's quite ironic, I think, that Mexico led the discussions to close the border with the US because of the worry from Mexico's perspective about people coming from the US to Mexico. And that is closed to non-essential travel until the 20th of April. So just finally, I just want to highlight a couple of countries in Latin America. So Costa Rica, there's a ban on entry except those with permanent residence and citizenship. And it's a criminal offence if you breach quarantine. In Costa Rica, there's a brilliant rule that you can file extension applications at banks and post offices. So this means that we can file and are filing renewals. There's no functioning consular posts. In Brazil, there's a partial entry ban on citizens and residents, and that's going until April the 28th. And you can file most applications online, but they're not being processed. And the authorities don't really want to initiate in-person meetings, and they won't really give approvals until the consular posts are up and running. In Peru, there's military on the streets to enforce the lockdown, very strict. And I think this is rather sweet. In Panama, they're limiting people by sex, going out days. So women can go out one day, men can go out in others. It's quite a novel way of issuing the quarantine. The Caribbean is very strict. Cayman Islands are shut completely, extreme measures in Bahamas. We've got a lot of expats in Guyana in the oil and gas industry, and they've closed the airport for incoming and outgoing flights. So very heavily banned in that area. And that's all really. And I just want to say, please, if you can't find the information on the website, I'm so happy to help you. Just contact me through LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia. And what I'd like to do now is bring our guests in. Patricia Tavares of Unilever, Yuki Watanabe of Gap, and Nitzan Yudan of Benivo. One thing that I think I've mentioned before is that we are launching a pro bono support tool for the industry. And this is something which we want the whole industry to come together with. I know Fragomen very kindly have very much got behind this, and many others have too. But the idea is to create something where we can all work together as an industry to support assignees wherever they may work and whoever they may work for to deal with the issues that they're facing. And I'm delighted that Nitzan Yudan, who's the CEO of Benivo and who's the inspiration of this, is on the show today. So Nitzan, perhaps you could say just a little bit about the idea, and then also we'll maybe show one or two, a quick demo of some of the parts of the platform. So Nitzan, why don't you sort of kick off here?
Thank you, Brian. So yesterday we did a full demo and a full session sharing this new tool that we've launched, the COVID-19 support tool that is available for free with no cost. for any client or non-client of Benivo, and can go live in 3 working days. And when we shared it, we asked for 2 things. For corporates, we asked them to share their challenges, and we committed to solve any challenge within 3 working days. And we've got a few great challenges yesterday that we are working at the moment on solving and delivering solutions and rolling it out to more corporates. And to, as you mentioned, to the industry, we've asked any supplier, vendor, partner in the industry who also want to provide a free support under the platform, as part, of the platform to do that. And it's really heartwarming and exciting to see how many companies of the industry have come together and shared materials, and we are on the process of getting these added into the platform and sharing services, and really there's a lot of help and support in this industry, which is really exciting to show. I want to give a quick 1-minute demo, as you said, of the platform, of this tool that is available. Anyone who wants to know more can watch either yesterday's session or send us a message, and we will coordinate a separate session. Let me just share my screen now. And Brian, if you can just confirm if you can see the screen.
We can.
That will help me.
Yep.
Great. And what we see here on this tool is that there is content that is relevant for people on assignment or relocating that are not at their home country, helping them with some of the local advice, such as getting your groceries, and they can see here which options they have available, and what their colleagues are using. So every content in Benivo is enriched by insights from colleagues. What are my colleagues doing? And I can see here which are the ones that are popular, and the tips and tricks in order to secure a slot, and how to get that with anything from food delivery to other content about remote learning with the children, exercising at home, even looking at sharing some of the virtual spaces that we work in, and people sharing their feedback. All of that is customizable, so every company can decide what they want to include, what they don't want to include, etc. And the heart of the session, the platform, is what we call the Action Hub, where we have the local health and transportation update. What's going on? Which medical center is the closest to me? And that's available globally. Which transportation services are working and not? What to do if I'm not feeling well? All the government official advice. All of that is here and up to date, including the ability to join WhatsApp groups, to chat with others, connect with others, or for spouses as well, or partners. And what I wanted to highlight here is one of these actions that we are hosting now, which is the immigration update by Fragomen. Those important updates that Julia has been giving on the show. We've actually teamed up with Fragomen, and the user can just go through the platform. This platform is available, obviously, for the assignees. They can agree to the disclaimer, and next they get the access in one click to see everything that is happening. I can click on that and get the updates straight on Fragomen per country that I want to know. So this information is being updated by Fragomen, and I can access all of that as the assignee. Is something is provided by Fragomen. So we invite other suppliers who also want to share helpful resources and content with the assignees to reach out to us. And for any corporate who want to implement that in their company, this is a branded platform that you can get live in 3 days, no cost. Really, what we are trying to do is to help the industry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Nitzan. That's really helpful. And we're getting lots of very positive feedback from people. But before I get into that, maybe I can just sort of speak to Patricia and Yuki and bring you into the conversation. And Patricia, I know you're based in Brazil. and you've got responsibility for Unilever for the assignees throughout the Americas. Maybe you could just say a little bit about what Unilever is doing, and also if there's any issues relating to some of the points that Julia was making about what's going on in Brazil, any on-the-ground information that you're dealing with. Do please let us know your perspective on things.
Okay, sure, Brian. So yes, I am based in São Paulo in Brazil, and I am responsible for the Americas. Unilever at no point in time demanded the assignees to move or to go home or to stay in the home country, in the host country. We gave them the opportunity to choose what they wanted to do, as we gave them the opportunity to tell us what they thought better to do with their families. Most of our assignees here in the Americas chose to stay in the host country. We have lots of intra-LATAM moves, so the situation in the country, in the home country, could be worse than the host country, and that was one of the reasons that took them to decide to stay there. Most of them also decided to stay with their families, which is good because it gives you a little bit more of well-being and makes you feel more comfortable when you end your work day and you look around and you have your partner and your kids with you. We had no problems with pet transportation, so all the pets stayed in their houses, no problems at all. And the good thing also is that as some of the countries, like Julia mentioned, some of the countries are partially closed, others are totally closed. For the ones that are partially closed, we did get a few requests. Can I move? Can I go by car? Can I go by plane? Every case was analyzed case by case to see if there was any issues with the borders closed or not. At this moment, in the beginning of April, I would say that all of our countries have plane borders closed. None of them are accepting flights. Some countries are even closed for repatriations. So most of them did during March open the borders for repatriations for any assignees or any foreign citizens of the countries that wanted to move back. At this exact moment, I only have one assignee that is concerned. He lives in Mexico today, and he doesn't know if the borders are going to be closed or not. So he is in conversation with us to see what is the best option for him. So luckily, we managed to keep our population calm. Nobody panicked, and we're here to support them for whatever they need also.
Okay, thank you so much, Patricia. And Yuki, tell us a little bit about the Gap. And I mean, I suppose everybody knows your brand. I know you're pretty much everywhere. I'm not sure how big your program is, but maybe just tell us a little bit about your program, what's going on in Gapland.
Sure. We actually don't have any assignees in Europe or South Africa region. Our population is really concentrated in Asia. So the COVID really hit hard earlier this year. So January, February was what was when we were dealing with the crisis. Most of our population was heavily concentrated in China, in Japan, and Hong Kong. So luckily or fortunately or just coincidentally, when things were really heating up, it was right before or right around Chinese New Year. So most of our assignees were traveling outside of China. So we were faced with a situation where people were actually stuck in that country and unable to return to China, especially to China and Hong Kong. So some of the people just chose to stay there, or a lot of people, we have a sizable office in Japan, so a lot of people went to Japan and worked from there. Now, most of them have returned to China and starting to resume their normal operations. The challenge right now are people with kids. They are having to deal with the online learning now. So not so much about the immigration or border closure. It's more about changing or adjusting their lifestyle and managing work in home life with the kids outside of school. It's kind of like similar to what people are facing in the US. We actually do have a couple of people that were supposed to be moving into US from different regions. So from Europe, and we we have people in Mexico or Latin America area that are trying to move to US. Those are new hires that we are dealing with. We did have one assignee that requested to repatriate from Hong Kong earlier this year to US. He probably would have been better if he stayed, because we were able to get him on a commercial flight back to US, but he was in quarantine for 14 days. Then we went to a shelter in place. So his life would have been probably a little bit more stable if he stayed in Asia.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuki. One of the questions I'd like to ask Patricia and Yuki and also the others, well, particularly Patricia and Yuki, is that how are you managing in such a fast-changing landscape? It must be so difficult. I mean, it's always difficult managing a global mobility function because rules always change and situations change, but none of us has ever seen anything like this in our lifetimes. So how are you guys coping in such a fast-changing landscape? How are you doing it?
So that is a big challenge, Brian. Like we were talking about before, if you talk immigration-wise, we're having changes immigration-wise daily, right? So we get the information in the morning, in the afternoon, the country has already changed their legislation and is doing something different. In relation basically to relocation services, most of them are closed down. So we did manage in the beginning of the process here in Latin America and in the US to pack a few things, but they're now in warehouses because we can't move them around, and we wouldn't move them around at this time even if we could, because it's not the recommended for us at least. New assignments, we put them all on hold. With the assignments that were starting on the 1st of April, which was the first start date for us in the crisis, we managed to move a few people that wanted to, but always, like I said in the beginning, giving the option to the assignee. So is he comfortable moving to a new country? Does he want to stay and postpone his initiation? We were very concerned with permanent establishment, for example. Can I start my new job from my home country? Is that going to create a permanent establishment? So we had to go for consultancy to give us the guidance, what could be done and what could not. If I can share this here, in most of the countries that we work in, permanent establishment is being forgiven because of the situation. So if you have this concern, if any global mobility professional has this concern, reach out to professional guidance to make sure that the country combination is allowing that. The other thing that we're doing, I saw there was a question here on how are we keeping our assignees calm. Hand-holding. Hand-holding is the secret. Reach out to them, talk to them. If they don't want to talk, send a quick note, send a WhatsApp, send an email. However the assignee prefers to talk to you and to reach out to you, make yourself available to them so that they know that they have your support. We, the GMLT and Unilever, we're having daily meetings to make sure that everything is happening, that we know what's happening in the other regions and any specific action that needs to be taken. So I would say that at this moment, 50% of our day is taken care of with COVID, and then the other 50% we get to manage to work with other things that are also ongoing. We put together guidelines for HR, guidelines for the businesses, guidelines for the mobility professionals. So we knew what to say, and so that everybody is also giving the same kind of information internally, which is also something that made the assignees happy, because whoever they reached out to would have the same kind of information. So that's the practices here so far.
Cool. And just to people who are listening and watching, I know there's a lot of you out there, please do keep on feeding in your questions. That'd be really, really helpful. Actually, whilst we've still got you, Patricia, maybe you just say a bit about things that Unilever itself is doing. I mean, are you doing things to support the situation, not from a global mobility perspective, but Unilever-wide?
Yeah, so Unilever has a very big program. Alan Jope, which is our global CEO, he actually announced the mass donation that they did globally to the main countries that are in crisis. We have factories that are helping to produce alcohol gel alcohol to make sure that we can distribute. Also, we have delivery of our products that are being done to the houses. For example, Bolivia is a country that doesn't work with very much delivery services, and Unilever managed to put together a program to deliver all the hygiene, the personal care and the home care products to the houses to make sure that everybody had enough hygiene products at home. So lots of small actions that are being done locally, and obviously our main action done by Alan Jope in the UK, which is our CEO, with the mass donation that they did. And the mass donation is not only on hygiene products, also it's one of on part of our food products also, so tea and other products that we have that can help in this situation.
Cool. And maybe I can just sort of go to you, Yuki. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, well, actually, just let's go to this whole question of the fast-changing landscape. I mean, Gap obviously is a huge brand. I'm guessing that most of your stores are closed around the world. I don't know if there's any countries where they're still open, but I'm getting in most places they're closed. I mean, how are you coping? How are you been starting to cope at the moment?
Yeah, so when Patricia mentioned 50% of the time dealing with COVID and the other 50 or whatever the percentage was, so for us, it's probably close to 100% of the time is really focused on dealing with something that's led by COVID situation. So our over 90% of our stores are closed. All the 100% of the stores in North America, that's Canada, US, and Mexico, are all closed. And we were hoping that's only for 2 weeks, but because shelter in place, we don't know when we're going to open. So with that, we had to make a difficult decision of going into furlough for all the, not all, but majority of the store employees. And now we're looking at HQ employees. Then with that, we needed to look at what does that mean for people that are here on visa, a US visa. So we're dealing with that and coming up with guidelines. So 90% of our time is spent with our immigration counselor in consulting with people that are losing status, whether from the furlough or USCIS is delayed extensions, denied extensions. We do have people that are stuck in deportation or that are expired, and we have no way of getting out. We do have, at the company-wide, we switched our product production to creating protective gear, so like masks, hospital gowns, and for those. I believe those are meant to be a donation. We don't have, I don't have a lot of first-hand information, but the production has switched to more focused on providing protective gears. So going forward, though, it's a changing environment. So on the majority of the side, we're dealing with crisis in how to manage the situation now. On the other hand, because Asia is reopening, we have a lot of pressure from the business to get people moving, but we can't move them because borders are closed, or even for China and Japan, everything is stopped. They're not even processing applications. So trying to manage businesses' expectations and needs versus what we can practically do in holding hands with the people that are supposed to be moving in February. And some people have their belongings packed up in storage for 3 months. And people are wanting to know every day, am I going to get on the plane next week, 2 weeks? What do I do? And I know we talked about pets last week. We do have people with pets that are wanting to move to Asia, and all the Asia countries has quarantines. And people with pets are usually considering the pets to be a part of the family, so they don't want to move without the pets. But we need the people. So what do we do? Are they even considering moving when borders are open, but the pet imports are still banned. So it's we're all treading in the uncharted water. It's an interesting period, challenging, but a lot of coffee.
Great answer. And I've got a great question coming in from Pat Jurgens from Air Inc. Big shout out to you, Pat. And Pat's asked, is anyone developing new policies for remote workers impacted by the pandemic? So Patricia, Yuki, or the others, if you've got any comments on it, are you developing any new policies?
So at the moment, we're not working with new policies. We're seeing what has to be done and what has to be adapted to the policies that we have in place. So far, we're trying to change them the least we can so that the impact on the personal life can be smaller as the impact on the professional life is already gigantic. We're working on this, on the first 30 days. Now we're in the phase. So we are, this morning on our call, for example, we were already seeing if there any kind of review that has to be applied to the policies, but nothing specific for real workers yet from us.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia. We're having a problem with your sound quality there, Patricia. I'm not sure if you've got, sometimes if there's other devices on in the house that can interfere with bandwidth. But let me ask a question of you, Yuki. Have you been developing any new policies in response to the pandemic?
So we do have a remote work policy for domestic employees, but we don't have one. And we're creating guidelines. It's not a policy, and we are looking at a little bit more from a practical side. It is. We do look at permanent establishment issue for any higher level employees, but this is not really the time to be really 100%. We can't afford to be 100% compliant. So looking at practicality and weighing a permanent establishment or other labor law risks, we're creating guidelines, not a policy.
Yeah, I'd just like to say a couple of things, Brian, because I think that also there's immigration challenges as well as PE risks and labor law aspects, because I think, how you do the right to work checks, whether or not, working from home complies with all aspects of the visa. And I raised this particularly last week in relation to the US, where I think people are forgetting that a number of these issues, employment issues, are being dealt with, and actually there's quite big immigration issues.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're getting a couple of comments in congratulating both Unilever and Gap for the work that they're doing to help the wider society. Martin Foxtrot, many thanks and kudos to Gap for shifting its resources to protective gear for health workers. So I think, and similarly with you, Unilever, I think the world is appreciating what some of our corporates are doing. And, and Nitzan, in our own small way, I think, the idea, the initiative you put forward and the support that Fragomen have given Julia and others have come in, I think anything we can do to sort of help people at this time of crisis is a genuine good deed, and it's probably a rare occurrence that we can all get to do something. Thank God it's a rare occurrence that we can actually pull together and do something. Here's a question that's come in from Hilary Moyer. She said, is anyone paying furlough to overseas workers? And she said, who are still on HMRC PAYE. Let me make that question a bit bigger, a bit broader. Is anybody furloughing not just their domestic employees, but actually their assignees as well? That's a no from Yuki. And Patricia, maybe we'll just try you again and see what your quality is like. Are you doing anything in terms of furloughing overseas employees?
At this moment, that I know of, nothing in the view. I think there's a discussion on it. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Is that first?
We can. It's not brilliant sound quality, I'm afraid.
Okay, I'm trying to. My daughter is like Julia is trying to help me
Okay.
here.
I think we're going to have to leave this, Patricia, at the moment.
Can I just add, Brian, that we have lots of different companies that we're acting for where they are furloughing people on tier 2 immigration status, and the good thing is that the guidelines say that that's not really regarded as a benefit, but there is this issue that I did raise at the beginning when I did my global update about whether there is still any obligation to pay minimum salary requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. I mean, another question that's come in is around the whole issue of remobilization. And this is a question from Lisa Johnson, which perhaps I'll address to you, Yuki. Do you anticipate that employees will be more hesitant to move in remobilization, or people will be jumping to start an assignment? In other words, I suppose we're looking at a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, if we go out a few months, do you think people are going to say, actually, I don't want to go through an airport, I don't want to go to a foreign country? Or do you think people are going to be saying, oh yeah, I've been cooped up too long, I really want to go?
I think it'll be, you're looking at two populations. So we have a group of people that have been in limbo for months and they're still excited. There is a certain anxiety, but they're more excited about the opportunity. Where you see a hesitation would be at a higher level. So let's say if we're looking at country GM or a head of HR or a head of finance, those are the people that have more options. And although it's an interesting and exciting opportunities, people with kids, those are the generation that usually have school-age kids. There is a little bit of a hesitation there, but I don't think it's drastic enough.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, one other question, I suppose, or two things that may be linked together, is the question of working remotely, which I'm guessing we're all doing, and I don't know what percentage of our mobility world is doing, but I suspect it's well into the 90s now, are working remotely. Is that going to continue afterwards? I mean, do we think that what we're going to see now is that having got used to working remotely, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that? And that brings me on to the second point, and maybe I'll bring Nitzan into the conversation here, is the importance of technology. I mean, how do we think the world of work is going to change now? And how is technology going to help it? And then maybe come back to some of the other panelists on how they see technology changing the way that they're going to work going forward.
So I can speak to a little bit about that. So we are the culture where we want everybody to be in the office. It's not required. We have flexibility, but especially in marketing or design teams, because they work in the team, you have swatches laying all over the place to create product. But so we always imported the talent, and which has been a challenge for with the U.S. immigration. But because of the shelter in place, these people are forced to work remote. So this is gonna be this is gonna really change the culture where they see a lot more possibility in working with remote teams. I think it's going to change a lot. And real estate is so expensive in two of the major locations that we have headquarters, which is San Francisco and New York. And with the immigration challenge, I can see the shift in more of an acceptance of working remotely, and especially in the function that does not have to be in the headquarters. I could see that where moving jobs that are less expensive cities, or opening up a pool of talent to wherever they can find, not bringing them to the headquarters location.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuki. And maybe Nitzan, as a technology guru, and I know very much a strategic thinker, how do you think technology is going to impact things going forward in our industry specifically?
Yeah, I think, I don't know about the term guru, but I think in terms of technology, I think it will play a bigger role going forward. And the simple thing is, just as like Yuki said, it will speed up processes. I think before the COVID-19 situation, many people were still going to do their groceries shopping in a store. Now they shifted for online delivery, those who can. Many of them will stay with that. Some, of course, will go back to going to the stores, but many will stay with that. And similarly, other trends will happen faster. I think in our industry, there's going to be very, very strong push to still deliver a very good employee experience and even better employee experience than before, but also there's going to be a push to reduce costs, and there's the businesses will, there is a financial crisis, and there's going to be an impact. And what is clear is that companies will not be able to offer the same level of benefits, and the only way to close this gap of how do you deliver a good experience while not spending as much money on services delivered by people is by technology. So I think these processes that we've already been seeing them in the industry, perhaps slower than in our industry, perhaps slower than they happen in other industries, are going to accelerate rapidly as the remobilization happens, and as people are looking into how they're going to handle those challenges. The other thing that is going to be very important is also to better understand where people are at any time. I think a lot of the questions that were raised in this situation were raised on the lack of clarity, the lack of quality of reporting. I know that we are already building solutions there to be able to know where every person is at any moment, and I think these kinds of stronger compliance and ability to deliver on that is going to be a higher priority going forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think that's very right. And I also think feeding into that, there's going to be more data analytics on the benefits of assignments, and really analysing, which assignees are really going to do well on assignment. A lot more thought will go into it, a lot more data analytics, because of the cost benefit importance.
Yeah. Ron, if I can just add something here. For Unilever, for example, we already have a culture of office.
I think, I'm sorry, the sound quality is really bad. I think, and in fact, we're out of time. I'm sorry, Patricia, but the sound quality is just not working at the moment. We are out of time, so what I wanted to do is just thank all our panelists for being this way today. We will be back again next week. So thank you everybody for taking part, and we'll be back again next week. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.